The Hard Stand at Saipan. March 9th, 1945. Ground crew move beneath floodlights, loading the bomb bays of an aircraft that looks, in the heat and shadow of a tropical night, almost like the B-29 it is supposed to be. Almost. Where the top turret housing should rise from the fuselage, there is a smooth, faired-over panel. Featureless, blank. The plexiglass blisters along the central section are empty. No gunners. No guns. The remote sighting domes have been pulled. This aircraft has been stripped. On the night of March 9th, 1945, 334 of the most expensive aircraft in history took off for Tokyo without their guns. Before morning, more people would die than died at Hiroshima. How did we get here? The B-29 superfortress began not as a machine, but as a belief. In 1938, the Army Air Corps looked at the distances of the Pacific and concluded that no existing bomber could fight the war it saw coming. What was needed was something that had never been built, a pressurized, four-engine aircraft capable of carrying a heavy payload more than 3,000 miles and bringing its crew home. Boeing submitted a design. The Air Corps chose it, and the program that followed became the most expensive of the entire war, $3 billion. More than the Manhattan Project. Each aircraft required 9.5 miles of wiring, 2 miles of tubing, 600,000 rivets, and 13 tons of aluminum. At over $500,000 per plane, 5 times the cost of a Lancaster, the B-29 was not just a weapons system. It was a statement about what America believed modern warfare could be. The belief had a name. The Air Corps Tactical School at Maxwell Field, Alabama, had been teaching it for 2 decades, precision strategic bombardment. The idea was almost surgical, not the mass destruction of population centers. That was what the Great War had taught the world to fear. Instead, the Norden bomb sight, high-altitude formation flying, and careful intelligence could identify the specific industrial systems that sustained an enemy's war machine. Ball bearings, fuel refineries, aircraft engines, destroy the systems, and the military machine seizes. Destroy the systems, and you never have to touch the people who operate them. The doctrine promised that bombing could be almost clinical, almost moral. The B-29 was built to prove it. And to protect the men proving it, Boeing and General Electric engineered a defensive system unlike anything previously installed on a production aircraft. The Central Fire Control System directed 4 remote-controlled turrets, 2.50 caliber Browning machine guns each, from 5 interconnected sighting stations distributed through the fuselage. The gunners did not sit beside their weapons. They sat at plexiglass blisters and directed those weapons through analog computers that corrected in real time for airspeed, target lead, temperature, barrel wear, and humidity. This system doubled the effective range of the .50 caliber round, 1,000 yards of reach compared to 500 for the manually aimed guns of the B-17 Flying Fortress, the most sophisticated defensive armament ever installed on a production bomber. A marvel of engineering made to prove that a civilized nation could fight a civilized war. The smooth-fared panel where the top turret once rose will matter again before this is over. Haywood Hansel believed it, not as a strategic convenience, but as a conviction, precise, principled, and to him personally inseparable from what he thought air war should mean. He was one of the doctrine's own architects, a core member of what colleagues called the Bomber Mafia, the small circle of Air Corps officers who had built their careers and professional identities on the Norden bomb site and the idea that bombing could spare the innocent. He had helped plan the air offensive against Germany. He had helped codify the targeting logic that governed it. He had made precision attack, as he put it himself, a lifelong personal crusade. In the summer of 1944, he was chosen to bring the doctrine to the Pacific. Hansel was not built like the man who would replace him. He was slender, wire-rimmed, deliberate, the bearing of a man who chose his words as carefully as his targets. Officers who knew both men described the difference simply: where LeMay operated like a blunt instrument, Hansel operated like a scalpel. He believed the distinction between the two mattered more than any tactical result. He believed that if the superfortress could locate the right industrial nodes, aircraft engine factories, fuel supply chains, the precision systems sustaining Japan's military production, it could end the war without burning down the cities where ordinary people lived. The doctrine and the man were inseparable. Both were about to meet the Pacific. In October 1944, the first B-29 touched down at Isley Field on Saipan. The runway was still under construction. No facilities existed beyond a bomb dump and a few fuel trucks. Hansel and his crews arrived at the edge of everything, and everything the doctrine promised was about to be tested. The first major raid launches November 24, 1944. 88 B-29s, 1,500 miles to Tokyo, target the Musashino aircraft engine plant. High altitude, daylight, precision. The Norden bomb sight in each aircraft, carefully calibrated. By every principle the doctrine holds, this should work. 24 bombers reach the primary target. 45 bombs land inside the target area. The jet stream had not been anticipated. At 30,000 feet over Japan, the B-29s flew into winds up to 200 miles per hour. A river of air at altitude that the planners in Washington had never fully accounted for and for which the Norden bomb sight was never designed. Bombs left the racks precisely aimed and arrived sideways. Later analysis would show just 6% landing within 1,000 feet of their aim points. 6%. And altitude compounded every other problem. A B-29 at 30,000 feet could carry only 35% of its low-altitude bomb load, the rest of the payload capacity consumed by fuel for the climb. The Wright R-3350 engines had a persistent tendency toward fire on takeoff, a consequence of their magnesium alloy components. The aircraft was fighting itself as much as the enemy. Hansel pushes harder, he increases tempo, he adjusts formations, timing, targets. He is doing exactly what the doctrine instructs. In Washington, General Henry Arnold, who has staked his career on this program, who has driven it through $3 billion and his own wartime heart attacks, reads the raid assessments and finds nothing that looks like progress. His deputy Norstad will say afterward that Arnold's life was that B-29. He was into every damn detail of that B-29. Arnold needs results. He needs them from a man who is not producing them. On January 19, 1945, Hansel's final planned operation, a strike against the Kawasaki aircraft plant at Akashi, goes uncharacteristically well. It is the first genuine success of the campaign. The evidence is in the air, heading back to Saipan as January 19th becomes January 20th. Norstad's aircraft lands. Hansel expects a routine meeting. What he receives is the end. He is being relieved. LeMay will replace him. The decision, made in Washington, is final. Hansel writes to Arnold that same day. The letter is short, and it is one of the most composed documents to come out of the entire war. General Norstad arrived yesterday and informed me of your decision to relieve me of this command and replace me with General LeMay. I was surprised, but I accept your decision. He asks Arnold for a single favor, not a defense, not a comparable posting, not a public explanation. He asks only not to be found a job commensurate with my varied experience. He writes, I am being relieved of the best job in the Air Forces. A training assignment, somewhere out of the way. Time to recover. He is fired the day after his most successful mission lands. Norstad will say afterward, I had to decide to take the action before we lost the goddamned war. What is not in question is what leaves the Pacific with Hansel. The belief that bombing could be humane, that the doctrine was not just a tactic, but a promise about the kind of war a decent nation was obligated to fight, departs on his transport aircraft. What it leaves behind, waiting at the airfield, is Curtis LeMay. LeMay arrives and says almost nothing to anybody. He is 38 years old, heavy-set, square-faced, a thick cigar clamped in the corner of his jaw, one side of his face carrying the permanent downward pull of Bell's palsy that gives his expression the quality of barely contained contempt. He is a foundry worker's son who paid for flight training with foundry nights. He led the Regensburg mission himself, 146 B-29s, beyond fighter range, over Germany, onward to North Africa, 24 aircraft lost. He told his crews in Europe that he would fly every mission himself and court-martial any crew that turned back without cause. The men around him do not describe him as agreeable. They describe him as effective. The doctrine has changed hands. The tonal shift is nearly silent. It is total. LeMay studies the results of the February 25th incendiary raid. His staff's analysis is specific. The bombs are falling from too high. The solution is to come down, dramatically down, 5,000 to 9,000 feet. At that altitude, accuracy improves, fuel consumption drops, and each aircraft can carry twice the bomb load of a high-altitude mission. The remaining question is what the Japanese will be able to do about it. LeMay's intelligence picture gives him an answer. Japan has only 2 dedicated night fighter units, assessed as minimal threats. The heavy anti-aircraft guns around Tokyo are calibrated for high-altitude targets. The lighter guns cannot reach above 5,000 feet. There is a window, a narrow altitude band where the B-29s will arrive below what the Japanese are searching for and above what their light guns can engage. The guns come off. Not the tail position. One concession to the possibility that something may come from behind. But the top turret, the forward turret, the sighting blisters, the fire control computers, all of it removed. The turret housings are fared over with smooth metal panels. The plexiglass domes are pulled. The 1,000-yard reach of the central fire control system is unbolted from the aircraft it was built for and set aside on the ground. The ammunition is left behind, and so are the gunners. A B-29 crew lives together, flies together, and depends on one another in the way that only people who have crossed the Pacific under fire can understand. The gunner has been part of that, watching the rearward arc, calling threats, trusting the pilot with everything he has. Before the March 9th mission, he is told he will not fly. His aircraft is going without him. It will lift off from Guam, cross 1,500 miles of Black Ocean, descend to 5,000 feet, and go over Tokyo with nothing but a tail gun and whatever is behind, the crew's willingness to keep flying. The pilot knows this. The gunner knows this. Whatever is said between them happens at the edge of a hard stand in the tropical dark, and then the aircraft taxis away, and the gunner watches it go. LeMay's own intelligence officers predict that 70% of the attacking force could be destroyed on this mission. LeMay hears this figure. He does not formally seek Arnold's approval. He notifies 20th Air Force headquarters on March 8th. Deliberately, on a day he knows Arnold and Norstad will both be absent, when no one with authority to stop him will be reachable. He explains it afterward, simply. He wanted to protect Arnold from blame if the attack failed. He has sawed the limb behind himself and is sitting on the end of it, alone. And the mission launches in the morning. Engines ignite across 3 islands. The sound builds over the course of hours. Right R-3350s, catching, coughing, finding their rhythm, multiplied by 4 per aircraft, and then by hundreds across Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. 334 superfortresses, stripped and bomb-heavy, lifting off at 50-second intervals into the tropical night. They do not form up. They cross individually because formation flying in darkness costs fuel the aircraft can no longer spare. Each one follows its navigation fix across 1,500 miles of Black Pacific alone at an altitude that feels wrong to every crew that has ever flown at 30,000 feet. The Pathfinders arrive over Tokyo first, They drop burning markers in a cross pattern over the Shitamachi district. The low city, the old city, a dense warren of wooden houses and workshops and narrow streets where hundreds of thousands of people are sleeping. In the radar stations around Tokyo, operators are scanning at 25,000 feet. Aircraft are detected near the coast around midnight, flying low, and low means reconnaissance. American bombers do not come in low. The operators maintain their search pattern above. At 12:15 in the morning, just as the first bombs begin to fall, the alarm is sounded. The B-29s are already over the city. The M69 incendiaries come down in clusters. 6-pound hexagonal cylinders of napalm, 500,000 of them across 1,665 tons of ordnance, dropping into a March wind blowing 45 to 67 miles per hour from the southwest. The incendiaries land and ignite. The wind does what wind does to fire. Burning blocks find each other. The heat from one street draws oxygen from the next, and that oxygen feeds the fires on the next, and those fires grow in turn. The firestorm becomes self-sustaining and generates its own weather. The B-29s at the tail of the bomber stream find the updraft turbulence severe enough to toss a 100-ton aircraft. The anti-aircraft fire comes up heavy in some sectors, but it is aimed at altitude bands the aircraft flew under, and it fades as the gun positions are consumed by what is spreading outward from the target zones. Japanese night fighters are aloft and searching. They are searching at the wrong altitude. There is one American voice from inside Tokyo that night. Raymond Halloran is a B-29 navigator and bombardier, a prisoner of war held near the Imperial Palace. He lives through it. Years later, in a recorded interview, he describes it. That was a terrible night, March 10th, and I don't know how I lived. But you could feel the heat, and I heard people screaming. Probably mothers and children trying to get into the moat. I was right across from the Emperor's palace, and they were trying to get into the water to avoid the heat. 16 square miles of Tokyo burned to ash before dawn. 267,000 buildings, more than 90,000 people killed, possibly over 100,000. The records are too incomplete, the destruction too total to fix the number with precision. 1 million left homeless. The single most destructive air raid in human history, exceeding in a single night what either atomic bomb would do 2 months later. 14 American aircraft lost. 96 airmen. The command's own intelligence officers had predicted 70%. The campaign does not pause. LeMay is back at his desk on Guam before the last aircraft lands. The raids continue through spring into summer. 34,000 sorties, 160,000 tons of bombs, 64 cities. The B-29B enters production. Boeing and Bell manufacturing a version with no turrets at all. Smooth-fared panels standard from the factory floor. The stripping decision formalized into the assembly line itself. LeMay begins dropping leaflets over cities before bombing them, naming the targets in advance. 8.5 million Japanese evacuate urban areas, a quarter of the entire urban population. Factory absentee rates reach 49% by late in the war. The economic infrastructure of Japan is not being damaged, it is being erased. Air crews at the tail end of the bomber stream begin to report that the stench of burned human flesh penetrates the aircraft over certain targets. They log this and continue flying. In August, 2 aircraft with only tail guns make their approaches over 2 cities. The silver plate modifications to the Enola Gay and Boxcar remove the same turrets, fare over the same panels, follow the same logic that governed March 9th. The Japanese could not threaten 3 aircraft with their remaining defenses, and so defensive systems were merely weight. The most consequential missions in the history of aerial warfare fly by aircraft nearly as bare as the ones that burned Tokyo. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito's voice comes through a radio broadcast and says what no emperor has ever said. On September 2nd, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, the surrender is signed. LeMay is on the deck. He has arranged for hundreds of B-29s to swarm overhead. The sky above the ceremony is full of them, stripped and sleek, the guns that armed them sitting surplus in a depot on Guam. No one has found a use for the guns since March. 3 postscripts. LeMay says afterward, "I suppose if I'd lost the war, I would have been tried as a war criminal. Fortunately, we were on the winning side." He says it plainly, without apology, without regret, and without the performance of either. In 1964, 19 years after the fires, the government of Japan awards Curtis LeMay the First-Class Order of the Rising Sun, Japan's highest honor, for his assistance in building the post-war Japanese air self-defense force. The man who oversaw the burning of Tokyo receives Japan's highest decoration from the nation he incinerated. The ceremony is conducted with full diplomatic courtesy. And the third, 3 B-29s that made emergency landings in Soviet territory during the war are not returned. Tupolev's engineers take them apart and rebuild them. The result is the Tu-4, the Soviet Union's first strategic bomber with nuclear delivery capability. The aircraft that LeMay stripped of guns because Japan could not threaten it becomes the template for the aircraft designed to threaten American cities throughout the Cold War. An empty blister on a Saipan hard stand. A plexiglass dome, no gun, no man. The March wind off the Pacific and the quiet that follows it.